Hi, everyone. Hopefully the sound is working. I hope everyone's doing well, and thank you for your patience. Let's dive into this talk now. So today we're going to talk about burnout, the greatest threat to your organization's security. We've always talked about burnout before the pandemic, but even during the pandemic, we saw so much burnout. I think all of us went through it at some point. But let's be real with each other. I think InfoSec, it runs on burnout. And this is a huge problem because burnout can lead to a security situation. So let's dive into it. For those that don't know who I am, my name is Chloe Messdaghi. I'm the co-founder of We Open Tech, which is a group basically of marginalized genders and allies that are trying to change how things are in security and tech to bring gender equality. But we also provide a safe, fun, supportive environment. Hacking is not a crime. I'm also the co-founder for that, also known as HiNack, and we're basically a grassroots movement to try to get hacker rights through changing the public perception of what is and who is a hacker. Because we can't get rights unless we change the public's mind. I'm also the growth strategy consultant on the side and advice columnist at Security Boulevard. So every Friday I have an Ask Chloe column where I basically answer your questions and provide advice. If you want to learn anything else about me, please go visit standoutintech.com. And yes, that is my handle at the top. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. My DMs are always open. Now let's get into the real reason why you are here. Does this seem like familiar to anyone? So this was RSA conference just last year. And as you can tell, the audience was full of hope. And it was like the start of a new year. We hugged, we shook hands, we attended events full of people, we had drinks and food together, we leaned in to hear each other at busy events. We had to speak extremely loud to be heard across the table, and we even attended karaoke. It was a glorious time. But then all this happened. And then this happened. And since then, we've been like this. And now we are in 2021 and hoping things will get better. And it does look like things on the horizon are, but it's still overwhelming because we never had a moment to catch our breath, nor we never had a guide on how to deal with a pandemic. And those that try to get therapy sessions, sometimes that was really hard because there's a wait list and they're still waiting to get help. So let's be real with each other right now. We're walking a very fine line of just being barely okay and terrible. And all of us have been dealing with burnout. Well, not all of us. I'm looking at you, New Zealand, lucky people. But even in New Zealand and everywhere before 2020, in security, we've known about burnout and we have been through it before all the chaos fell in 2020. And with burnout, we're placing ourselves and organizations at a huge security risk. We'll most likely click a link because we're not 100% who we are. We may not patch right or overwhelmed by what is needed to be patched ASAP. But let's also be real. Sometimes we're kind of seen as bots and not humans. And humans cannot handle 24/7 work because when we are working all hours and always expected to be on calls online, how do we even balance personal life and work life? Because burnout occurs when we are not practicing self-care and when our work demands more from us, we spend less time on personal life and the balancing is completely gone. And stress increases. We feel guilty. We struggle to sleep because we feel like we're trying so hard not to drown. And you may even notice changes on your own team, such as like employees withdraw or fast to become sad or angry or delays in email response or projects. This can be seen even remote too. You don't have to be in person to notice when employees are burned out. Let's be realistic. And right now, working from home and remotely has increased the number of work hours, increased expectations, and has really increased the blurriness of work time and limits because you want to let your manager know that you're working. And we don't really have boundaries anymore. And some of people have actually quit because they can't juggle the work and personal life and because their company failed them. Please understand this. You didn't fail yourself. Your company failed you because they couldn't be more flexible and they don't practice inclusion and equity. And you might be like, wait, Chloe, why are you bringing inclusion and equity in this? But let's be real. Majority of the workers that have left are marginalized persons, and especially women, because they've always been the person that has to take care of the kids, that has to prioritize their personal life over their work. And this is a huge setback for women later on when it comes to them coming back to their work because of that gap. So let's be really blunt right now. Between you and I, we haven't had a 9-to-5 job for ages. It doesn't exist in InfoSec. And this is a really contributing factor because employers push employees to work from 9 to 5 and yet send emails and Slack messages and text messaging and call you before and after hours. This places you and your team at a very losing situation because they feel obligated to respond. And this is why the burnout cycle continues. And for those who are not aware of what burnout starts to form and look like, it can be that it used to take a few minutes to respond to an email. Now it takes an hour or so. You feel exhausted, trapped, maybe empty. You feel like you've pushed yourself to a breaking point where you no longer are coming up with new ideas and not inventive, but rather taking meds to help with the aches. You're overly anxious over events and deadlines. You can easily cry or get angry faster than usual. You may not respond to friends and family when they call or text for some time. And then this guilt starts entering. Your personal life is completely slipping now. You can feel it slipping. Your life is now your work. And you start to feel unappreciated for your work, at your work. And then you become resentful at your work. And then you end up hating and dreading your job. This is the moment you lose your team members because what we've been doing is putting employees at a huge health risk. Don't believe me? Think about it this way. No matter how much sleep you get, you feel exhausted when you're burned out and emotionally depleted as well, which then mimics depression. You may even struggle with sleep, such as trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. And when we're stressed out, our cortisol increases and it gets so hard to shut down our minds, which causes us to toss and turn and reduce deep sleep or even gain enough REM. And when we don't get proper sleep, stress levels increase, mental state can start shifting to anxiety and depression symptoms. And when we're overly anxious or experiencing depression, we start to get sick a little bit more often. Have you ever caught yourself suddenly you're getting colds more often? But the usual trends is gastrointestinal issues, headaches, infections, colds, flus, cold sores, rashes, or irritated skin, like somehow your skin's getting more irritated. And the one thing to note is that stress does lower your immune system. So when our immune system is low and stress is high, your joints and muscles get stiff because your body is on survival mode, thinking that's a perceived threat. It can even turn into muscle weakness and fatigue if left untreated. Prolonged stress, it increases high blood pressure. And then we have to worry about heart attacks and strokes because there's so much adrenaline and cortisol over an extended period. Burnout is not a joke. It's extremely serious. And we have a real problem in our industry that's leading our colleagues and ourselves into this situation. And for those that don't know the difference between stress and burnout, I always use this as an example. When you're stressed, you take a bubble bath, you'll feel better, right? But when you're burned out, you can take all the bubble baths, you can drink all the glasses of wine, you're not going to feel better. That's the difference. Burnout happens when we have way too much stress that has not been dealt with. So let's get real into why we're still in this burnout trap within InfoSec. And we're going to have to look at the results of our industry because we have a very interesting industry. It's 24/7. There's not too many industries like that. There's not too many jobs that are like that, but we have those. So here are some facts. Please note that these facts were done and the research was done before the pandemic. These numbers are probably much higher than they are. But 21% of CISOs said that they've taken a leave of absence because of job-related stress. 41% of CISOs took this as a significant step, even though many responded being afraid to take sick days. And 35% neglected to take all their allotted time off. Because 48% of CISOs said that their work stress has impacted their mental health, while 35% impacted their physical health. 40% of CISOs said that their work stress has impacted their relationships with their families or children, and 32% said it impacted their relationships with their spouses or romantic partners, and 32% said it impacted their relationship with their friends. 23% said that they're using medication or alcohol to manage stress. Once again, I want to point out these numbers were done before the pandemic. Please note it's probably way higher than that now. And when it comes to American CISOs and UK CISOs, about 94 to 95% report that they basically are working more than their contracted hours, on average 10 hours more per week. In addition to 83% of the American C-suite execs and 73% of UK execs confirm that they do indeed expect security teams to work longer hours. In other words, we're expected to work beyond normal work hours. And we don't get paid for that extra work hours, by the way, as you are all aware of. But look, the CISO is a manager and also a leader, and having someone who's burned out that leads can become dangerous to employers, security risk, and increasing possibilities and managerial issues. Coping with such issues can lead to them self-medicating on the job and walking a very thin line of what is appropriate. But once again, this is not a CISO's fault. Please understand that. It's a system that is very much broken, an industry that isn't sufficient in the long run. It is this industry that continues to fail us and runs on people being burned out. So let's take a moment here. We have a foundation that doesn't empower anyone. We have a foundation that disempowers us in every single way. There's no wonder we have a rotating door and a mental health crisis in our industry. And I'm about to show you why it's like this. So why are we burned out? Let's talk about this. Well, by being in security, we're monitoring and operating 24/7. And sometimes we work throughout the middle of the night because we cannot sleep well because we're always at the edge of our seat when it comes to security, because we know attackers work all hours. And we're always worried when this breach will occur, because it will occur. Because we all know if there was a breach, it would be ad hoc style to fix it. Don't believe me? Well, according to the Ponemon Institute, while secure response planning is slowly improving, the vast majority of organizations surveyed, 74% are still reporting that their plans are either ad hoc, applied inconsistently, or they have absolutely no plans at all. Additionally, more than half, 52% of those with security response plans said that they never reviewed it or had no set time period of when to review it, or even testing those plans at any time. And with COVID-19 and working from home, how many of these plans have been updated? Yeah, this is one of the reasons why we had a 300% increase of successful breaches. So what do? We totally forget about the human element. We throw tools at the problem because it's so much easier. Think about it, so much easier to understand the human element role that plays here. Because it's easier for us to comprehend. If we throw more tools at it, we'll fix the problem. It doesn't work like that. We're humans. And that does not sort anything out. If anything, it makes the situation much worse, because when we add tools to it, guess what? It's not in the plan, and coordination is completely off. And these third-party tools, we have absolutely no idea how secure they really are either. So this is really stressful. I mean, are you stressed out now? I mean, perhaps your cortisol level is rising? No? Well, then I want you to imagine the situation. Imagine you're part of a crew, and you just found out your cruise ship is sinking. But you found out after for some time because you were alerted by your system. Your customers are aboard, trusting you for their safety. Your team is scared. Some are paralyzed by the fear of failing, but you're trying your best and they're trying their best. But there's a catch here. okay? Your entire team hasn't slept well and has seasickness. So they're not exactly 100% state of mind. If anything, you could say that they're kind of functioning at the same rate as someone who is burned out. Okay, so you have the backstory here. Now imagine the captain pulls out the safety binder to know what is the protocol at that moment. Unfortunately, the binder that was updated is not on your ship. You're using an old procedure, but have new features on this ship. Are you stressed out now? Because this is what it's like dealing with bad plans. And when the human element is taken out, it leaves you with a wreckage. Because the truth is, bad actors are everywhere. As you know, they attack at all hours. And 0 days drop often. And we constantly need to be up to date what bad actors use. That takes time and energy. And this is why we struggle. We're part of a crew. And when we don't function well or communicate well, it becomes a really scary situation. And the reason we're insecure is because we know how incredibly important it is. But we also need to come to terms that if we work around the clock and don't practice self-care, or we don't even promote employee wellness, what's the point of it all? Because we can be in danger to the organization as well if we're running on low battery and feeling not well. And this is why burnout matters. This is why we keep turning to tools to not find the time to plan, prep, practice, and self-care. We become that security team that sinks. We won't be able to fix a breach fast, and it's really, really scary. And please don't turn around and blame your employees if they're not performing well, because the majority of you, that is what happens. You let the team member go without checking to see what have you done that has reduced their performance, because chances are they're burned out and feeling very much alone. With COVID-19, we're taking care of family members on camera daily, unable to leave our homes, can't see our friends and family. Some of us live alone, some of us put off our important time events. And we've lost people close to us. And our colleagues are struggling. We're worried about keeping a job. We're worried about affording the life we have. We're worried we may get COVID. We're worried we may not make it through COVID. And we're not a machine. We're human. And the human element created security and runs on security. So we're struggling with staying okay before COVID and during COVID, except New Zealand. So how can we lead like the Prime Minister of New Zealand? Let's think about it. She worked with the people and planned, and she worked with specialists and listened and took actions. Because the reality is that when we plan and take actions, there's less disruption. When we listen to each other, there's less disruption. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how do you invest in that? So then we can do better. Investment number 1, listen and take action together. Be strong, be kind, ask your team what they need. Don't just listen, I want you to take actions. When we listen to each other and strategize together on how to improve the team or department, it reduces the stress, because stress happens when we're not being listened to or feel uncomfortable to speak up. Your colleagues may share that certain tools aren't needed, or that there's like this tool out there that just flag things that all in one that is better, and they may share what is missing on their team. Perhaps less meetings are actually needed. Let's be real. We don't need an hour meeting most of the time. We only need 15 minutes, or sometimes we just need an email. But by working together on what are the issues, we can collaborate together on how to reduce issues or completely resolve them. Investment number 2, plan together, strategize together. With collaboration and listening, working together with a team to make strategies and revisit your security response plan, make it up to date. Revisit your plan every time a new tool is removed or added, team member change, environment change, and so on. By creating and making solid plans, it helps speeds up the recovery and reduces the stress when a breach occurs, because there's actually a plan that's up to date. Also, you kind of owe it to yourselves, your colleagues, your organization, your customers as well. I mean, look at what New Zealand did, okay? They planned. They had 25 deaths. We had over 560,000 deaths in the US because someone didn't plan or listen or take actions. Investment number 3, encourage self-care. Studies have shown that when dealing with burnout, taking 1 week off away from work or anything related to work provides recovery for a burnout. If your employee is burnt out, make sure they feel support to take time off. Also encourage it often to the team, because majority of employees in security, they're afraid to take time off because they feel guilty for not being there to help their colleagues, and or kind of also giving more work to their colleagues as well, or going back to a dumpster fire. I feel like that's like the number one thing, is always the worry of, I'm going to come back to a dumpster fire. So if you can, if you're a manager, give everyone 1 day off a month for a mental health break. And lastly, make sure you have 1 day per week dedicated to having absolutely 0 meetings. I mean it. 1 day a week. This could be a Monday. This could be a Friday. This allows your colleagues to catch up on any items or projects. You don't need to have meetings every single day. Have 1 day where there's no meetings. Investment number 4, be kind, respect boundaries. Please be kind to one another, because from what we have learned, when we work together and understand how we impact others, we start practicing empathy. And empathy is certainly missing at times in our industry. I mean, just listening and being there for one another it reminds us that there's people who care for each other. And because we cannot assume how someone is doing by the way that they look or their performance, we do not know what each other is going through. So instead of going at someone, reframe. Think of before you speak or act. And I mean that on Twitter too, you guys, because you really don't know how that will impact the other person. And plus, that's kind of like bullying too. So reframe yourself before you do anything. Think it through before you take action or speak. Because it's just important for us to be kind to one another, because if anything, what we have seen in the pandemic is that we are so divided, especially in the US. It just feels like we're such a divided country right now. And it's hard to try to have a conversation with someone who from another political party. And this is the thing we need to figure this out, because I don't think the politicians are doing too much about that. But it's something to think about, is that the one thing I can talk about forever about the pandemic is just the awareness that we failed as humans to have empathy for one another. We couldn't get and work things out to try to make things better. And I think that's one of the things that reason why New Zealand shared that be kind, because that's the element we need to stick together to protect the world, from darkness or security threats, but also from ourselves. But we also know that being kind is respecting boundaries, especially at work. And, of course, 6 feet distance and a mask. So what can you do right now? This could only take you about 10 to 15 minutes, okay? So it's only going to take 10 to 15 minutes right now. You can even take a screenshot of this slide and share it with everyone, because the reality is this is how you can fix this really fast. 1, just set a weekly one-on-ones for 15 minutes with each employee. What do you mean by that, Chloe? Well, what that means is that your manager does not follow or micromanage you. What happens is that they have a 15-minute meeting with you. It doesn't even have to be 15 minutes, where you basically are sharing everything that you're working on and with your manager, so you all are on the same page of what to prioritize. This helps reduce the stress level, but also allows you and your manager to have good communication with one another. Make Monday or Friday a no meetings day. Every week, there should be a no meetings day set for your team and your department. To be honest, if you can make it company-wide, do it. Monday or Friday is always great because it's always like a holiday, so it doesn't really affect you too much. Now, you also want to do is set up a meeting with your team to explore ways to improve together. Remember that strategy session? That's what you need to do. Basically, look over your plans. You also need to look over the tools that you're using and really think, what is missing on the team? What can be improved on? And this should be about an hour meeting. but you should make sure that everyone in your team participates and making sure that everyone feels valid and feels comfortable speaking up. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. That's something for you to research, something to Google. But also you should create an anonymous survey, like one that is actually anonymous, because the thing that you should know is that insecure, we're kind of paranoid. And so one of the things is that even if you do create an anonymous survey, we may think that you may be trying to track us and our opinions and thoughts, and we're worried about losing our job. So it's really important is to actually create an anonymous survey and just have it open where people can drop and write comments or suggestions. The thing is that we need to do better when it comes to feedback. A lot of times when we give feedback to HR, they don't take initiatives, or they'll do like this kind of like half approach of initiative or an action, and that's not helpful. So the one of the things is that if you are asking for people's suggestions and you're asking for advice, you need to listen and take actions. Ignoring it is not going to do anything. By being a good manager, if you are a manager, it's about wanting to see your team members go beyond you. You are a mentor. You are their coach. You are supposed to provide directions and, help them through their career. And so that's why it's really important that we start owning that part. And lastly, I want you all to remember, when we work together and listen to each other, magic does happen. When we work together, making sure people get personal time off without them fearing of taking time, away, we're then becoming collaborative. And when we collaborate, we reduce the stressful items that hold back the team from like really thriving. And when we focus on balancing work and personal life for everyone, that's when we no longer have the dumpster fire. Because burnout is a security concern if we don't treat it. And it is something that we need to treat, because we're all human and the human element rules in the world that we live in. And whatever you do, and whenever in doubt, just remember, if New Zealand can plan well, so can you. Because in all of us, there's a Frodo who's on a journey to get rid of a malicious threat. So overview of this entire conversation is burnout places you and your team at a huge risk. Collaborate to form strategies to improve the team. That's what you should be doing right now. Start making plans and revisit your security response plans if you have them. Making sure that they're on point and up to date is really important. And promote self-care by being kind and respectful to boundaries. That means if you need to get a hold of an employee and it's not urgent, send an email. And remind your employees that when you send emails, it's not urgent. That when it is urgent, it should be a text message. This is something that is really important that we practice. That means also Slack. Don't be using Slack after work hours. And we also have to enforce those boundaries as well. Because if we are not balancing our work life and our personal life, we become our job and then we lose who we are. And I think that's a lot of reasons why we get burned out, because we forget that we're more than just our job. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for having me. And, I'm here to answer any questions that you have. And once again, thank you to the conference for having me. I tried to wrap this up a little bit faster because I didn't know how much more time that I would have, but I do know that usually this talk does bring a bunch of questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you are uncomfortable asking any questions, feel free to DM me on Discord or on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. My DMs are always open. And thank you all for existing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right. Let's do this. I see some questions coming in. So let's do this. All right. Ray asked a question, which is, can I put an out of office alert on my email all the time, not just when out of the office, or is that a bit much? This is a great question. You want to know how I deal with this is that I use I block my Mondays and Fridays so no one can book meetings, period. And the reason I do that is that I want people to know that those are my days to pick and choose whether or not I have a meeting or whatnot. Now, if you are going to take time off, it's really important that, talk to your manager about it, make sure your team is all okay on it. But when you take that time off, so if you are burned out, the only way to help reset that is by taking time off. And I usually recommend about a week. If you have a more severe case, taking 2 weeks off is pretty good. So having 1 week is kind of like a quick refresher. But when you do take off that week, make sure that you turn off all devices. Don't check your work email. Don't do anything on social media. Literally take a week off from social media, because social media is also a contributing factor of your mental health sometimes. So it's important for us to reset that by disconnecting to reconnect with ourselves. So that means not doing anything InfoSec. That means when you're taking that week off, that means not studying for anything or learning the latest technique or tools. Just don't take that week to learn how to play the guitar or something, or learn how to paint. That's really important for you to do. Now, when you do take that time off, make sure that in your calendar that when the day you come back is blocked off so no one can set meetings. So right when you start, right when you are setting your calendar invite for going out of office, make sure you give yourself an extra day. So say, for example, if you're coming back on the 23rd, say that you're coming back on the 24th in your email. And this is a way for people not to expect a fast response, giving you a couple of days of catching up. But also that when you come back to work, you're going to be flooded with an inbox. It's also important to let your colleagues know that you're not going to be able to look and go backtrack in Slack, that they should CC you in every email that's something about your responsibility or your duties for your role. And you'll be able to then know what to prioritize when you get back, because you're going to come back to a flooded inbox. Let's be real. And in this, you'll be able to go through on the day when you get back. Now, the other thing you should do is send an email to your entire team members, asking them, right after an hour or two, you've gone back and you're in your inbox, asking what is needed within the next 24 hours. Is there anything that needs to be a high priority? This is good for you to know right when you come back, so then you know what you need to work on, and then the emails can wait. But you want to try to generally catch up on your emails within the first 2 days of coming back. So that gives you some clean way of not having any meetings on the first day, but also making sure that no one has expectations that you're not going to respond to any emails until the day after you get back. So those are some good tricks to learn. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Okay, when you do go on vacation, how do you get others to respect it and not load you up with tons more tasks when you return? I love this one. Okay, so one thing to note is that there's a huge chance you're going to return to a dumpster fire, because that's just how security is. So the one thing is that when you're caught up and you've had that week of detoxing from everything, you feel better, you can actually handle things. And so when you get more tasks when you get back, you'll actually be able to handle it mentally a lot better. Because when you're burned out, you tend to just push things all the time, like deadlines, give yourself extensions. And sometimes it takes you an hour to complete a project, when in reality, it used to take you 10 minutes to probably complete that project. So you're going to work a lot faster. So it's not going to impact you as much. But also to note, once again, to do what I kind of shared about when you're taking time off, how to do it in a way where it actually helps you a lot, where it gives you about, 2 days of being able to catch up. That's going to help you a lot to do some stuff like that. It does reduce the anxiety and the anxiousness. What other questions do we got here? Okay. Any thoughts on handling working hours with the international team? So one of the things that I would say is that when you're dealing with different time zones, it's important to actually recognize who's on what time zone. This is one of the reasons why I'm not the biggest fan of Slack sometimes, because people tend to message off hours. So what it would be a cool idea that you can do is to talk with your team members to find out what times that they actually work. I know that sounds really strange, but the reality is not all of us are early morning birds. I don't remember the word for that, but we're not all very early. Some of us actually are more like night owls. We prefer to work more at night because we feel more creative at night. So one of the things that I always talk about is that I feel like companies can do a better job by having more flexibility with hours. Like having that set time for everyone just puts everyone into a huge bucket, and that doesn't work. So one of the things is to acknowledge this problem. The other thing is to just look at on what hours work best for everyone. So finding there might be a sweet spot that there's 2 hours every day that everyone on your teams, no matter where they're located, is the best. That's the best time to set up those group calls and remind people that if they need to have a whole team meeting, that these are the 2 hours every single day during the week that works the best. I think that's really helpful. But yeah, also, you can add time zones to calendars. That also helps a lot. What other questions do we get? How does self-study come into play when trying to maintain a work and life balance? This is a great question. I am a constant learner, so I am taking courses always. I'm always wanting to learn something new, but I have to admit sometimes I dread it. And because I don't have the energy or I'm not passionate enough about it, but I also know I want to do these things. So I think it has a lot to do with balancing your work and personal life. But the other thing is that when we're burned out, it's very hard that even when it's after work hours to be able to focus on something. And we may actually have kind of convinced ourselves that to be able to disconnect from the world is to watch TV or watch movies or play video games. And that's not necessarily true. In a sense that, we have to kind of change that mentality a little bit. So say, for example, what you can do is, watch an episode of TV and then reward yourself. Not reward yourself, but to read a chapter in your book or whatnot, and then reward yourself with another TV show. This is one way how to do it. And this is actually a really helpful approach if you are someone who has problems focusing for long periods of time, is to do kind of 1 hour blocks. So 1 hour you focus on one area, the next hour you focus on a different area, and then so on. Especially if you're one of those people that hyper focuses when you're passionate about things, and only when you're passionate about things. Usually when we're studying, we're not always 100% passionate about it. So it's really good is to kind of focus on studying for 1 hour, take a break for 1 hour and go back to studying for an hour, or study something new in your book. That kind of off and on kind of thing. It does help if you can't hyper focus on one thing for a period of time. All right. How do I get through my thick skull that burnout is real and I'm not immune, and I tend to be worse about it than my employer? This is a great question, because for the longest time, I always thought that my personality is that that I could just keep going and going and going. And what ended up happening was that for 2.5 years, I didn't take a single day off. I mean it, not a single day off for 2.5 years. And I was going to conferences. I was going on weekends to conferences. I would go to 3 conferences in a week and fly across the world to do these things. And I just thought that I was immune to it as well, but not really immune. I just knew that I just need to catch up on sleep at some point. But it does catch up on you. And when it does catch up on you, it kind of feels like it's overnight sometimes, or it just sneaks up on you, or you suddenly realize, oh my God, maybe I've been distracting myself this entire time and I've been burned out. And I've been trying to, pretend I'm not one of those people that's burnt out, but I totally am. So, I mean, the thing is that it's really important is to understand that when you are not having self-awareness of how you're feeling and dealing with situations, you're going to have these type of problems. And no one is immune to this. I'm going to be honest, every single person has been burned out at some point in the past year. And many of us are still burned out right now. So just think about it that way, is that no one is immune to it. If anything, you will have burnout at some point, and this pandemic really shows that. Just note that you have to be understanding of your symptoms. So like journaling once in a while really helps understand what's going on. So if you ever feel trapped, that's one thing. If you feel empty, that's another thing. If you're feeling overly anxious or you're feeling sad frequently or angry frequently, that's something to understand. If you're having problems falling asleep or staying asleep the whole night, these are some signs. The other sign is I've noticed that when you drink extra caffeine, so for example, if I'm drinking more than 1 cup of tea a day, that's letting me know I'm starting to go into burnout. And this is actually very common. We tend to reach for caffeine to like keep us going because we feel so exhausted. And it may be a temporary trick, but it's not actually working as well as you think it is. The other thing is to acknowledge if you're drinking more. This is another thing to notice, is that, for example, if you're drinking every single day, even just a glass of wine or a beer a day, you need to acknowledge that that's going to be a bad thing. You don't want to create a routine of drinking every single day, even if it's just one drink. That's something to be aware of. A lot of times when we're stressed or burned out, we'll use marijuana more often, we'll drink more often. And these are things of escaping in a sense. So we have to also recognize that also by eating. You'll be, whenever we're stressed, we'll either reach for like the junk food. We always reach for the junk food. And so like you'll crave something that's salty or sweet. We don't care about our health as much. And that's another thing. So when we're not appreciating who we are and not balancing that, that's going to be a huge problem. But yes, everyone gets burned out. You could be burned out right now. It's just recognizing that and understanding that these little things do add up. Why did you decide to give this talk? What was your inspiration? What made you want to give this talk? So before the pandemic happened, like literally that year, I basically was realizing that a lot of people in the hacker community kept saying that they're burned out or they're tired or they feel trapped or they feel unappreciated. And it really acknowledged that we have a mental health problem in our industry and our employers are not caring about it. So I actually was on a panel with mental health hackers at B-Sides SF in 2020, actually. And we talked about this. And I realized that, okay, we need to have an actual talk just on burnout because I'm afraid that if we have a pandemic, we're going to get really, really bad here. And when the pandemic hit, that's when I recognized, okay, I need to start creating some talks around burnout because that's really important for us to do. And so basically that's what I did. I kind of created this talk about how you can work with having burnout, how you reduce burnout, how do you fight burnout, how to recognize burnout. So I started giving that talk last year. And then I also realized that I'm not going to fix things in a big way unless I start talking about how this industry, it just makes it happen over and over and over again. And we're not solving it. We're just talking about it, but we never take action. And so I want this talk to be like that. I want us to have these conversations. I want to open that door for us to have conversations on how do we improve this industry that was created in a way to cause burnout. So that's why I created this talk. I think that's all the time that we have for Q&A, like within here. I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to double check. But yeah, so I just wanted to let you all know that I'll be in here, but I think I need to wrap up because I know there's going to be another talk coming soon. But if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. My DMs are open, and thank you all for attending this talk. And, I really hope to see everyone in person some point soon. And yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm going to close out of Zoom now.